Welcome to Besties. I'm so excited that you're here, and I'm really excited for you to meet my friend Rachel. She has training in architecture, but she does all kinds of things. Um, and essentially, I think she would tell you that she's a storyteller.
It's true. People ask me all the time now what I do, and that's what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and usually in the service of a project that's trying to raise money, but that's fundamentally what I do.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And one of the things that really impresses me about you is that you've been able to face some challenges in your health and really pivot your career so that it works. And so I'm really excited for all of my friends out here to get to know you and hear about the storytelling that you do and the tours that you do if anybody's in your area. And Rachel gives tours of the Santa Fe area and also different sites in New Mexico, right?
Absolutely.
And and if you have the opportunity, you should totally do it. So anyway, tell me about more about what you do because I think there's probably things that I don't know.
Well, I mean, you're right. I was trained as a historic architect. I spent 25 years in traditional architecture, literally saving historic buildings. And then, a year after I graduated from graduate school, I found out that I was going to go blind from macular degeneration. And at that point, that was 20 years ago this year. And at that point, they told me I'd be blind in 3 years. So I had to pivot. And that was a little bit of a knockover after having gone to undergraduate and graduate programs. And I'd done my master's mostly in Europe. And that sort of knocked me over for a minute. And I thought I was going to have to leave architecture, but it turns out that I didn't go blind in 3 years. I am still going blind. It's a long process. But I have staved off the worst of it for 20 years now. And, but about 2008, with the last recession, I had to really start pivoting because my eyes were really becoming a problem. It was my center vision is going away, so I couldn't connect the dots on drawing anymore. And so I really started to pivot and do mainly historic preservation. And that's pretty much what I do now. I do traditional historic preservation, documentation of historic buildings, but I do less of the drawing part of it now and more of the history part of it, and even more so into looking at how it's connected to the communities that the buildings are in. And so that way, people who are trying to save like a campus of historic buildings can really start to prioritize because there's never enough money to save all the historic buildings. So how do you prioritize and then go get grants for that? And in my case, because I am considered something of a person in the know, or an influencer, if you will, I also get to do a lot of coverage for magazines and newspapers and books and documentaries. I also make documentaries. I've made 2 documentaries about Native American architecture here in New Mexico. So yeah, I try to use everything that I know and have learned over these many years to try to save old buildings and then also to build better community. I mean, that's what I'm really all about, is building places that people want to live and making them more livable and not just preserving for the sake of making more pretty buildings that nobody can afford except for a certain kind of person, which is great for that, but it doesn't build community.
Hmm.
So yeah, so that's what I do.
I love it. I love it. And what do you love the most about doing this work?
Oh my gosh. I think that's a hard question to answer. I love what I do. I think you know that.
Yeah.
Molly and I have been friends for 20 something years, 25 years, I think almost.
It's
But
been a while, yeah.
yeah, I love I love finding the nuggets of stories that we have forgotten about ourselves. That's my very favorite thing. I love to find that little piece of our story that's been lost that helps people in my generation, people that are living and breathing right now, relate to something in a more whole and holistic way. A lot of our history, especially in New Mexico, a lot of our history has been forgotten, sort of on purpose, because we have this sort of anti-modern sentiment.
Mm.
Um, and I just love finding those things that people get excited about their community. And I think that's why people love for me to do tours, is because I don't know if I'm such a great historian, but I'm really enthusiastic. And I love showing how all the dots are connected, which I think is really one of my big skill sets.
Mm.
It's just I've always seen patterns. They're just very natural for me. I don't know if it's my astrology or just the way I'm made up. But the more challenging the problem, the more I'm interested in solving it. And so with historic preservation, 95% is finding problems and solving them. You know, you open up a wall, you think it's a normal wall, and there's like duct tape and baling wire wrapped around a pallet that's filled with rocks that's glued together with cement. And it's like, what are we going to do now? And I was always really good at that when I was doing more physical preservation as an architect. But I love the story part of it now, because it's really engaging to me to try to suss out that little piece that people are going to care about now. And that's, I think, the funnest part of it, is because I get to interact with people all the time and sort of test hypotheses. I'm like a scientist of sorts. I've always in my mind, I sort of secretly think of myself as like an architectural Indiana Jones.
Oh, nice. I love it.
But it's true. That's kind of how I see like what I do. So it's fun.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned connecting the dots twice, and one of them was the dots on the drawings that you can't connect, and then now you connect the dots in the story. So it's like one type of vision
To another.
leaves and another kind of vision comes in.
And I think that that's been absolutely true in my career. I believe that, when I was in traditional practice, I was very linear. I was always doing I love spreadsheets. Oh my gosh. and doing these really sophisticated drawings and really complicated spec sheets. And when all that got taken away, my brain adapted. And that was really interesting, to see it go from being this like really type A OCD, every dotted, I dotted and T crossed, to this person who's like I feel like I'm almost like atmospheric now. Like I'm in this liminal space where history is floating around, and I'm trying to grab all these little tidbits and put them together into a story. But it's the same thing. It's just doing it in a totally different way. And also, you have to be very open-minded in this path now, because there aren't clear answers. It's really trying to suss out, the little things that make things more interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I remember when early on in our friendship, when you were doing all of this very more technical work. And I mean, I know you would never brag on this, but I'm going to brag on you a little. Like, you've worked for big names in architecture, big
Yeah.
names.
Yeah.
People would be impressed if you said those names. I don't remember them, but I know they were big names. But and they've been in like magazines and all the like super impressive things. And I remember you all the issues that you had with that world, and telling me how much you wanted to be an artist.
It's interesting how the universe sort of forced my hand on that, right?
Yeah.
Because the reality of it is that I was an artist when I was little, but I was, as so many in my generation were, You'll never make enough money being an artist. You can't do that. You should do something productive with it. And my mom somehow managed to get me, well, I mean, she took me to Paris. That's what made me decide to be an architect. But she managed to sort of hone it into this like
Mm,
workable thing. But really and truly, I probably always really wanted to be an artist. I just didn't think that it was possible. So it's
mm.
fun now because I just won this artist residency. So I'm going to go spend 2 months next spring just doing nothing but art. And I'm so
I'm so
excited.
excited for you to do that.
I'm so excited. I'm like, wow, you mean I actually get to do this for real? What's that going to be like?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Um, let's see. We already kind of talked about how you got into this.
Mhm.
Is there any more to the story that you'd like to share?
Oh golly. I mean, no, I mean, really, truly, it was going to Paris that made me decide to be an architect. A lot of people have always sort of been really interested in that story because I mean, what I really wanted to do when I was younger was well, when I was supposed to be practical, I thought, well, gosh, I should go be a fighter pilot.
Practical.
I should go to military school and learn how to fly, and I should go be a fighter pilot. And so I actually did. I prepared for that process, and but then they found out that my eyes weren't going to be good enough. And also, Top Gun came out, so the whole world wanted to be fighter pilots. And so, yeah, that was kind of funny. And I was lost for a while. I really was. For 2 years, I didn't know what to do with myself because that was sort of the thing that I had I'd put all my eggs in that basket. And yeah, so when my mom took me to Paris, it's like she knew that that artist part of me was dying to get out.
Hmm.
And so I think she was really trying to help me find, a place for that in the world. But the funniest thing about that was, I mean, at that time, there still weren't very many women in architecture. I was one of very few women students. And this was in the 90s,
Yeah.
that would be shocking today. But yeah, but the minute that I arrived in Paris, I knew it was very clear that art and architecture were something that I was going to get. So within a month, I had transferred schools to Texas A&M and was in the architecture program. So that was pretty amazing. And
Yeah.
they let me
Wow.
do my master's in Europe, which was even more amazing.
Yeah. Oh, that's
So
awesome.
yeah, I got to do my master's in Italy and France, mostly. So yeah, that was amazing.
That sounds amazing.
It was. The funniest part about that, though, was that when I came back, I'd been trained in a European school, we have this European viewpoint, at least on the East Coast. So when I moved back, and that's actually how we got to meet, was I thought, well, I'm going to move to where they have the oldest architecture in the United States. I'm going to move to Virginia,
Hmm.
which is so funny because now I'm working on architecture that's 1,000 years older than that because I'm in New Mexico. But
Oh,
but they didn't have that lens.
right.
This Native American architecture wasn't considered architecture. It was considered
Right.
sort of a one-off thing. And I'm like, some of these people have lived in these communities for 600 years, and that's
Mm-hmm.
incredible.
Yeah,
It's
that
just
is
amazing,
incredible. That is
right?
incredible. Yeah, and that's amazing that you're doing that. I love
It's
that you're
super
doing
fun.
that. I totally
Yeah,
love it. And we
me
grew up
too.
in a time where if it wasn't European, like it wasn't even worth talking about or studying or learning about. And I'm so glad to see that that is starting to change. And I hope that
Yeah.
that continues.
I think it will, especially as more indigenous architects are coming on board. I mean, it's been one of the most amazing things to witness. I've been in New Mexico for 14 years now. And when I first got here, I think there was one indigenous architect. And now there are dozens, and there are dozens in the architecture program and at the university here. And it's just, that's amazing. That's so cool. And I've made 2 movies about their architecture where I never spoke. No white person ever spoke. It was only their words about their design. And I just think that that's so cool that they have this tradition we're just discovering. Really, we're just discovering it all. And they're leading the way and us learning about it. And I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's probably some good nuggets that will help us in the future, in this very uncertain looking future that we're all facing.
Oh, absolutely, because they have always still, I mean, it's so amazing. I did this panel discussion on Saturday night, and there were several Indigenous artists on there, and they were several of them that were younger than me, and they were talking about what it was like to grow up on the res. And they literally spent their childhood outside, literally slept outside, watching the stars. They would sing songs to the stars, and just their relationship with the world that we live in is so powerful. And so they're always in relationship. They know where the sun is. They know where the wind is. They know that in the wintertime, you put your back to the wind and you tuck yourself in. And that's how they build their buildings. And there's so much for us to learn from that that does not depend on technology, which is
Yeah.
incredible, right? Like what's the number one thing about sustainability? You cannot depend on a system that is probably going to fail.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
You know, the gas will go out, the electric will go out, something will go out. So how do
Yeah.
you do it? And
Yeah.
that's incredible way of building. With that as your baseline, of course your building is going to perform.
Mm-hmm.
So that's exciting to me.
Yeah. 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 Like, how can we get through this? I love it.
Hmm.
And how can we get through it without causing more damage? You know?
What?
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't waste. People don't waste here. That's one of the interesting things, you know, living out in the West is that people are way less wasteful. They save everything. It's almost like a depression kind of
Mm.
mentality, post-depression mentality. You know, my grandparents were that way. Were yours?
Yeah.
Yeah, my grandfather had like literally an entire house full of stuff just in case. It was sort of infuriating in some ways, but he always had the right screw for the job. So.
And my grandmother always kept like a pin neat house, but her closets were just jammed, packed to the gills with different stuff. All right. Let's do you want to talk about astrology now?
Sure. I'll talk about
Okay.
whatever you want to talk about.
Oh, okay. Well, I like to talk to you about everything.
Okay. But we could start with astrology if you'd like.
Well, let's just talk a little bit about since this is kind of the purpose of the video.
Uh-huh.
Let's talk about what prompted you to seek out consultation with an astrologer? I know it's been a while. It's been like forever.
Uh-huh. You know, honestly, Molly, I think that what really prompted me was that when we first became friends, there were little moments, because I always give you credit for this. There were these little moments that you would say something, and now you do that in your newsletter, you know? And I would like, because oftentimes I get the sort of my spidey sense gets up and I'm like, something's wrong. And inevitably, you would always just kind of casually mention in conversation, oh, well, you know, Mercury's going to go, Mercury's retrograde. So, of course, that's going to happen. Or, you know, Mars square Sun. And so, of course, that's going to happen. And then you would explain to me why. And that was really intriguing to me because, to be honest with you, I didn't give astrology any credibility until you kept saying things that were like on point. And it would explain things, and I just felt like I had tools to sort of see things in a way that wasn't so personal, you
Yeah.
know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why I decided to get my first reading with you. Because I mean, partially I'm very interested in experiments, and I hope we're going to talk about our experiment that we did, the 1 year blog where I did
Oh,
everything
right.
you told me to do. I've always been interested in sort of testing theories. It's just part of that problem solving nature. And so yeah, I came to my first reading and then it's just evolved from there. And I think you've been reading for me for 20 years now.
Yeah, I think that's
Which is
true. It is
incredible.
incredible. It is
Especially
totally
because I wasn't a
incredible.
believer. And now I'm like, go talk to Molly.
Thank you, honey.
Woo, you get a side pass of tea.
Yeah, girl.
The tea boy.
My T-boy is coming.
I hope he's got palm fronds and is wearing barely anything.
So you you started to seek out, you decided to get a reading after hearing about Mercury retrograde and stuff for a while.
Actually, just hearing you talk. And I don't know, it's that viewpoint on the world, and that perspective is so fascinating to me. Talk about connecting dots. Oh my God.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
And so for me, that's like, I think it's been some kind of training for me to watch you be
Hmm.
like, "Boop, boop, 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 boop," and like all of a sudden you have this beautiful story. And I'm like, what is she talking about?
Yeah. It's so natural to me now that sometimes I forget how special it is to
It
be
really
able to see
is.
the world this way because when I work with clients, I often tell them like I'm not going to probably tell you anything that you don't already know, but I'm going to put a context or a frame around it that's going to help you understand it better.
I think that's very true. That's an accurate assessment. Although you have told me some things I didn't already know. I'm pretty sure.
Has has learning about astrology and getting astrological consultations has that changed the way that you approach your work at all?
Oh, wow. What a good question. Absolutely. Um, yeah. Astrology has transformed the way I think about everything, not just work, but yeah, everything. At one point, I was, up until last year, actually, I was running a for profit and a nonprofit. And at the same time, which was crazy pants, but I was for several years. And it's very difficult because they're very different. They're completely different worlds, right? So for-profit work is business, business, business. Nonprofit work is grants, grants, grants. And people who give you money as an investment have a different sort of set of criteria, or people who you're spending money for have a different set of criteria than people who are giving you money for noble causes, right? And so you have to be very clear on which audience you're talking to at that moment. And one of the things that's interesting, and I think it all comes back down to that year that we did. So for those that, just for background, I took a year, gosh, what was it? Early 2000s,
Sounds right.
early 2000, 2006, maybe somewhere like that.
That sounds about right.
And I had Molly do an entire a calendar year for me of telling me basically almost many days, like, this is a good day for marketing, and this is a good day for reaching out to people. This is a good day for sort of putting your head down and just blowing through work. This is a good day for whatever. And what was crazy about that was, so I tracked everything that I was supposed to do that year, and then that I wanted to do that year. And I've always been a little bit audacious, so I took some real chances. And I would, I always do that. I'll ask for almost anything that I'm curious about. And when I tracked all of that information and was like, how many of these projects did I actually get? I had an 84% success rate.
Oh wow.
And I try so many things that was shocking to me, because usually I would say my success rate's probably about 40%, 50% on a good year, if I'm just really shooting everything at the right times. But 84% was unprecedented, and I don't know if I've ever been that successful since. So it just made me start paying very close attention. Like, there is kind of a right time to do these sort of things. And so I've kept coming back, maybe not on the detail of day to day, but sort of the overall view, and watching your newsletter and seeing what's happening and tracking that in my calendar, and knowing, like, when it's a double cross day, I'm not going to do a lot of outreach and try to be out in the world and be, or ask for that audacious goal, that step towards that audacious goal, or help. I'm not going to do that on those days. I'm going to wait for the star days to do that.
Well, I used to do the crosses and the stars
Hmm.
I do green and red color codes.
Oh, that's
So
easy.
that should be really easy to see, I think, and really easy to recognize. And you don't have to read any of the print, like just the print. It doesn't really matter that much. But I can
Ah,
also break it down and I can add your astrology too. Like I can add your green days and your red days. And it starts to get a little complex because there's weather green and then there's Rachel green and there's weather red and Rachel red. Um,
what happens when there's like, did you call it weather red?
yeah,
Weather? Okay, so
weather.
what happens if it's weather red and Rachel green?
Then the world is freaking out, but you're like doing all right.
Okay.
So you can help people or you can like take advantage of dissonance or, you can kind of just kind of back away from the fray and stay in your own little world and get shit done. So yeah, it usually turns out that, some instability in the world or whatever it is it benefits you in some way or you're just able to move through it a little easier than some others.
Absolutely. Cool. And
Hmm.
so that's been really, really helpful for me,
Yeah.
because it just kind of gives me, well, I mean, I think the biggest thing it does is it gives me permission to take a break sometimes
Yeah.
and to know that when the energy is wonky, that it's not necessarily like something that's happened that's got me agitated. Maybe I'm agitated because something happened, but I'm also agitated because the stars are going to make me agitated. Like right now with how
Hmm.
many planets in retrograde right now,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah,
Six, I
more to
think.
come.
And everyone I know is just like fritzed out. And I can see
Yeah.
it. And they're calling me and they're like, Rachel, what's wrong? And I'm like, go get Molly's newsletter and watch the solar flare.
Yeah, the solar flares too. I appreciate you letting me know about the solar flares. Those
Well,
are
that was
something.
really interesting. That was one of those experiments because I was struck by lightning while I was driving from Colorado to Wyoming one day. Now I was in the car and I wasn't hurt. It blew out all the electrical in my car, but it's made me really sensitive to electromagnetic forces. Like I know when there's an MRI machine around, for instance,
Mm,
because I can
yeah.
feel it, or I can feel storms coming or whatever. And yeah, so it was just that was another one of those weird things where I started tracking, like I'm having this sensation that's like feels like it's not really me or there's not really any justification and it's not in the astrology. Looking at the NOAA website, and sometimes it was a solar flare, other times it was geomagnetic storms, so like a space storm that
Mm,
it ionizes the atmosphere and creates sort of this electrical storm in the atmosphere. I can feel that.
yeah.
And I didn't know that before. And not everybody can. Some people are more affected by it than others. But I think because of the lightning thing, maybe I am. Maybe I carry a static charge or something. And so that was really interesting too. So yeah, I do mention it from time to time when people are freaking out really bad.
I can't imagine what it's like to have lightning hit your car when you're on the road. That's got to be terrifying.
It was so surreal. I thought I'd been shot, but I couldn't tell you where.
Oh, wow.
Like my whole body just was like, I've been shot. and and I pulled over the side of the road and it took me probably a solid 5 minutes to like calm down and like realize that I wasn't bleeding. And it wasn't until a lightning bolt struck out in the field that I realized what had happened.
Oh, wow.
Because for the first probably five, actually I don't think I believed it was lightning for probably another half an hour. Chaos in
Oh,
the
yeah. Thanks,
back. She
Kitty.
wanted a better view.
Yeah, I guess. Rachel, thank you so much for telling us about how you're using astrology and especially about your fascinating, wonderful work. Um, if someone wants to read more about what you're doing or get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to find you?
Well, my website is theministryofarchitecture.com.
Ministryofarchitecture.com.
And but most people follow me on Instagram, and that is at Arca Ministry.
Arca
AR,
Ministry.
uh-huh. So at ARCHIMINISTRY.
Okay, I'll put a little tag beneath you too so that people know who they're talking to and how to find you.
Great.
Awesome.
And that's where I keep. I have like a little. It's sort of a series of love notes about New Mexico architecture. So.
Oh, nice. And then people can find out about your guided tours there too.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'll actually start posting. I'm not doing any tours right this minute, because I'm getting ready for a big sort of to do in January. But I will. I am doing tours. They are listed on my website, and I'll start posting about them on my Instagram feed when I start doing them again.
Great, great. Oh, I'm so excited. I'm so excited for people to meet you because you're just such a good person to know.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you, Rachel, so much for telling us about your work today and how astrology has helped you in your work and in your life. I really appreciate that.
Well, I
And
appreciate your help.
well, I appreciate you, and I just love you so much. And
I love you too.
I know that my folks are just gonna love you too.
Oh, thanks, Molly.